In a last-ditch effort to take as many enemies with him as possible, he orders a massive launch of Russia's nuclear arsenal, targeting the West. As the silos open, hundreds or thousands of intercontinental ballistic missiles, armed with nuclear warheads, streak away at speeds of 15,000 miles per hour. But where are they headed? Thankfully, this hypothetical remains very, very unlikely. Unfortunately, it's also not entirely impossible. Russia has the world's largest nuclear stockpile, with nearly 6,000 weapons and roughly 1,600 actively deployed warheads. The question of where these might strike if fired is one that experts and policymakers have worried about since the days of the Cold War. Now, with nuclear threats once rising again, it's worth looking at how such a doomsday scenario might play out. In this video, we'll take a look at the places Russia might target with a nuclear barrage, starting in the United States. Some of the first US targets for a Russian nuclear strike are the major centers of power you would expect. The Pentagon is among the most important of these, as it acts as the headquarters for the US Department of Defense. If Russia were able to damage or destroy the Pentagon, it would be an enormous blow to the command structure of the US military. It would likely not cripple the US armed forces, but would cause a major disruption and make it far more difficult for the US to organize a response. Because of the size of the nuclear blast and its fallout, a strike on the Pentagon would also likely destroy much of Washington, D.C. Some 713,000 people live in D.C., while more than 6.3 million live in the greater D.C. area. Estimates for a nuclear strike on the Pentagon indicate that close to 500,000 people could be killed instantly, with many more falling sick from radioactive fallout afterwards. The initial blast would vaporize the Pentagon itself and anything else within a half-mile radius. Damage from the strike would radiate outwards some 4 miles from the epicenter, including the area containing the US Capitol building, White House, and Supreme Court. While the nuclear fireball and the enormous shockwave following it would be deadly on their own, it is the potential for widespread radiation which would create the biggest hazard. Radiation anywhere near the blast would be intense enough to cause third-degree burns, while also causing many harmful mutations in victims' DNA, leading to cellular degeneration and cancer. Even if people in the larger blast radius managed to survive the explosion, there's a good chance they would die from the huge amount of radiation exposure. The White House is roughly 2.17 miles from the Pentagon, putting it well within the damage zone of a nuclear blast. If the president were there, they would likely be killed by the force of the shockwave, even if the White House and Capitol were not targeted independently. Thousands of US officials and workers would certainly be killed, sending the government into crisis